Wisconsin and Western Michigan. Western Michigan at Wisconsin. Wisconsin favored by 24 here. This is another Friday game. This one's going to be on FS1, so Fox Sports 1 at 9 o'clock Eastern time. Should be a fun one to see what Wisconsin can do. There's a lot of question marks surrounding Tyler Van Dyke, the wide receiver room. They switch things up on defense a little bit, so I'm curious to get you guys' thoughts. Zach, we'll go to you first here. Give me, for Wisconsin, give me something that they didn't do very well last year. Something, maybe they had a bad stat, or maybe there was just something observing them. You're like, this is an area they really need to improve at, that they need to start off doing well versus Western Michigan. Not necessarily to win the game. I think they're pretty handily going to win this game, but the fans are going to want to see it go well for optimism this season.
So Luke Fickell wanted to bring in an air raid style of offense combined with a power run. Tanner Mordecai averaged 6.6 yards per attempt a year ago, which is not very good if you're going to run an air raid. And so I think the biggest thing is Tyler Van Dyke has to stretch the field with his arm. They have a really good receiver in Will Pauling. I'm sure they have a bajillion tight ends. They could probably lend one to Illinois if they really could with the rules. But they've got to stretch the field to make that attack more potent, particularly to free up running lanes for Chez Malusi. I think that's the biggest thing. Stretch the ball down the field. I don't think they need to get, go crazy like 9.5 yards per attempt, but if they can get that up to about 8 yards per attempt, that's going to make their offense a lot more effective.
Yeah, and a lot more dynamic too. I mean, you're going to have to be covering a lot more in different ways, and different receivers are going to be running down the field more. So it's going to be a huge piece of it. I have other thoughts, but I'm going to let Kurt go first. So that way I don't take whatever Kurt's cooking up over there. So, Kurt, what's something they struggled with last year they need to do better against Western Michigan?
Yeah, I was thinking passing game as well. Bringing in an air raid style offense and only 14 passing touchdowns last year, like that's a little concerning. Especially because they brought in SMU's guy former SMU guy, Mordecai, I believe was his last name.
Yep.
And he threw the ball all over the yard at SMU. So I really thought that would work better. I knew it's a big transition, so I wasn't expecting it to be amazing. I've listened to some Wisconsin podcasts talk about how they thought maybe the offensive line going from such a power run game to now having to be a little bit more pass protection heavy. Maybe that's what part of the struggle was, and not all on the receiver room. But I know that's a big question mark overall, especially when you're trying to convert to an air raid. Maybe one thing that I know it sounds silly to question Wisconsin's running back room, but Braylon Allen moves on. Chez Malusi is back, which I thought to start the year, he was much more effective than Braylon Allen was last year, but then he went down with injury, and he's had some injury history in his past. I'm just curious about the depth. I know they got the 4-star backups there, that the talent's there. It's just we haven't seen them on the field. So, it sounds silly to question Wisconsin running backs, but given it's a new offense and just that Chez Malusi has shown some injury history, if he goes down, I'm curious what that looks like behind him. So I think that puts even more pressure on the pass game to get going if that were to happen. So just kind of curious to see, like a lot of us, what the offense looks like in year 2 of Luke Fickell. And really hoping they come out of the gate and just drop the ball. Let's go Western Michigan.
I figured you'd have something like that to add in there. So you were being complimentary the entire time. I was like, oh man, Kurt's feeling good about the. Oh, okay, there we go.
Yeah,
that's what I thought was going to happen eventually. I think for me, one of the biggest things, the wide receiver room. I mean, you bring in the Kenny Guyton coming in from Arkansas. He was actually interim offensive coordinator at one point over there, so he has some experience doing some bigger thing coming out of the SEC. I have confidence in Will Pauling. Bryson Green, he had a pretty good season last year, but with the quarterback issues of Tanner Mordecai and also him getting hurt and Braden Locke having to come in and that whole situation, that was a little difficult. So I'm interested to see what Tyler Van Dyke, his connection looks like with those two guys. I'm interested to see if they move Will Pauling out of the slot and maybe put him on the outside a little bit more, because they do have that kid from Hawaii, Trek Kukuhuana, however you pronounce his name. It's a Hawaiian name. So good luck. but he's a very effective slot receiver that's coming in. I don't think they're going to move him to the outside, but if they really want to try to get creative, they could move Will Pauling out there and maybe give Trek some more time in the slot. We'll see. That's a huge piece for me. And then the other piece, guys, is the defensive line. They have got to be more productive this season. There was only one defensive lineman that had more than one sack last year, that being James Thompson Jr. Now, CJ Goetz and Darrell Peterson, some places list them as edge rushers. Really, they're more outside linebackers in my mind, so I didn't count them, but I guess you could if you really wanted to. But Kurt Neal is a big name, and the transfer they brought in, Brandon Lane as well. Those are going to be some pretty good guys. But I'm hearing Kurt Neal might be starting at the nose tackle for Wisconsin this year. Sounds like he had a really good offseason. People are really high on him. Arguably the most improved player, I read one writer, right? So if that's the case, and they can really shore up this defensive line, and like I said, they weren't necessarily bad last year. They just weren't productive enough. They weren't getting enough sacks, enough tackles, things like that. So, obviously Luke Fickell's going to have very good linebackers. That's going to happen. That's his baby. That's what he's going to have working well. But if you can get that defensive line working well, in addition to those linebackers, and if Ricardo Holman can do some more interceptions this season like he did last year, man, he was nasty last year.
Yeah, he was really good.
This could be a really, really good defense. I'm banking on it. Zach, you and I picked Wisconsin to win, what was it, 8 or 9 games?
I think it was 9, even though I tried to stop you from it, and you're like, no, we're going. And I'm like, okay. I was glad to let us go to 9 wins with them.
Yeah. Oh, don't get mad at us, Minnesota fans. We did pick you for 7. So, okay. All right. And it wasn't quite 9, but 7's pretty good. All right, Zach, anything else on Wisconsin before we move on?
No, I think just, we're talking about how they can improve. I think something that's just, it's helpful to remember is we're in year 2 of Luke Fickell. And Kurt, I just thought you made a really good point that the transition of offensive system does take some time. And I just wonder how much, I'm curious the improvement. I have a similar thought with Purdue and their defense in year 2 is how much of an improvement is there from year 1 to year 2 now that people are more familiar with the system. And I think we saw some of that in the bowl game against LSU for Wisconsin. Tanner Mordecai looked a lot more comfortable in that game. Again, it's not Tanner Mordecai this year, it's Tyler Van Dyke, but I'm curious about, are we going to see a jump because of we're in year 2?
Yeah. Completely agree. And, I know I have an uncle who is a Badger fan, very high in that secondary, and they were pretty good last year, I believe, as well. So I'm hoping that there is some holes on that defense as a Gopher fan. But I will say, just as an outsider, putting my fandom aside, I think Luke Fickell is a fantastic hire, and it's looking like he's doing what needs to be done in order for them to take that next step. It really does look like they're putting it together over there. But, I've been wrong before, and I'm hoping I'm wrong again.